Babe, meet my fat friend I've been telling you about. She's so fat, and the only thing she knows how to do is eat.
Sometimes, the deepest wounds are not caused by strangers, but by the people you trust the most. Jane was having what seemed like a peaceful afternoon, enjoying her snacks and fresh air, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. Then her best friend, Vivian, arrived with a handsome young man named Michael. Jane's face lit up with excitement. She thought Vivian had finally come to introduce someone special to her. But within seconds, that happiness turned to humiliation. In front of Michael, Vivian pointed at Jane and laughed. "Babe, meet my fat friend I've been telling you about." The laughter that followed felt like thunder. Then came more insults, cruel words, painful mockery. Every sentence cut deeper than the last. James stood frozen, fighting back tears as the person she trusted most turned her into a joke. Humiliated and heartbroken, she ran inside, crying. But what happened after that day shocked everyone, especially Vivian, because the friend she mocked was about to become the one person she would desperately need. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to support more powerful and inspiring stories like this one. Jane was born into a family that many people admired. Her parents were wealthy, kind, and always made sure she had everything she needed. She never lacked food, good clothes, quality education, or comfort. To outsiders, Jane seemed like the luckiest girl in the world, but there was a pain she carried quietly in her heart, a pain that no amount of money could remove. From childhood, Jane struggled with her weight. While other girls her age wore their confidence proudly, Jane often hid behind oversized clothes and forced smiles. Everywhere she went, people judged her before they even spoke to her. Some laughed, some whispered, others simply looked at her with pity. As she grew older, the comments grew harsher. "She's pretty, but she's too fat. Imagine how beautiful she would be if she lost weight. Who would want to date someone like her?" Jane heard those words so many times that eventually she stopped pretending they didn't hurt. She smiled when people were watching, but when she was alone, she often stared at herself in the mirror and wondered why she could never be enough. When she gained admission into the university, she told herself that things would be different. She believed she was finally leaving the past behind. She imagined making new friends, creating beautiful memories, and experiencing the kind of life she had always dreamed of. But reality was far different. During her first weeks on campus, she noticed how people looked at her. Some students laughed openly, others avoided sitting beside her. Whenever groups formed for discussions or social activities, she was usually the last person considered. Sometimes she sat alone during lunch while other students chatted and laughed together. She often pretended to be busy with her phone, just so people would not notice how lonely she was. On many afternoons, she sat quietly eating by herself while conversations floated around her. Sometimes she heard her name, sometimes she heard laughter immediately after. She never turned around to confirm if they were talking about her. Deep down, she already knew. One afternoon, while sitting alone under a shade, slowly eating her lunch, she heard a cheerful voice. "Hi, is this seat taken?" Jane looked up. Standing before her was a beautiful young woman with bright eyes and a confident smile. "No," Jane replied softly. "You can sit." The young woman sat down immediately. "I'm Vivian, first-year accounting student. What about you?" Jane smiled nervously. "I'm Jane." "Nice to meet you, Jane." For the first time in a long while, someone sat with her willingly. They talked for nearly an hour that afternoon. Jane went back to her hostel happier than she had been in months. What she did not know was that Vivian had noticed something many others had also noticed. Jane came from a wealthy family. Vivian came from a completely different world. Her parents worked hard every day just to survive. Some semesters, paying tuition became a struggle. Buying textbooks was difficult. Even feeding herself properly sometimes felt like a luxury. Vivian hated living that way. More than anything, she wanted a comfortable life. She wanted expensive clothes, designer handbags, fancy restaurants, and everything money could buy. When she noticed Jane's loneliness, an idea formed in her mind. While Jane saw friendship, Vivian saw opportunity. Soon, they became inseparable. Jane was overjoyed. Finally, she had someone she could call her friend, someone who laughed with her, spent time with her, and seemed to genuinely care. Whenever Jane introduced Vivian to her parents during phone calls, her face lit up with excitement. "Mom, she's my best friend." "That's wonderful," her mother would say. "You sound happy." "I am happy, Mom, really happy." But behind Jane's back, a very different story was unfolding. One evening, Vivian sat with a group of friends in their hostel. One of them frowned and asked Vivian, "I still don't understand."
"Why are you always with Jane?" Another laughed. "Seriously, out of everyone on campus, why her?" Vivian smirked and crossed her arms. "You people worry too much." "Then tell us," one friend insisted. Vivian laughed softly before lowering her voice. "Trust me, I know exactly what I'm doing. Once I've gotten everything I need from her, I'll walk away." The group burst into laughter. "So you're using her?" someone asked. Vivian shrugged. "Let's just say I'm being smart." While those conversations happened behind closed doors, Jane continued giving without limits. Whenever Vivian struggled to pay school fees, Jane quietly paid the balance. Whenever Vivian admired a dress in a store, Jane bought it for her. Whenever Vivian needed money, Jane never asked questions. "Jane, I don't know how I'll survive this month," Vivian would say sadly. Jane would immediately open her purse. "Take this. You can pay me back whenever you are able." Vivian never paid her back, not once. Years passed and their friendship continued. Vivian became so dependent on Jane that every problem somehow became Jane's responsibility. Whenever she wanted expensive shoes, Jane called. Whenever she wanted to attend an event she couldn't afford, Jane paid. Whenever she was hungry, she ran to Jane. "Jane, can I have some of your food?" "Of course." "Jane, I need money urgently." "Okay." "Jane, can you help me with this?" "Sure." Jane never complained. The truth was simple. She was terrified of losing the only friend she had. To her, keeping Vivian happy felt worth every sacrifice. Eventually, university came to an end. Through the influence and connections of Jane's parents, both young women secured jobs at a reputable company. When Vivian received the news, she screamed with excitement. "I got the job! I got the job!" she shouted. But even that blessing had come through Jane. Yet Vivian never paused to appreciate how much Jane had done for her. Instead, she quickly began planning her next advantage. Not long after they started working, Vivian approached Jane with another suggestion. "Why don't we live together?" she asked one evening. Jane smiled. "Really?" "Of course. We're best friends. It will be fun." Jane immediately agreed. She never suspected Vivian's real reason. The house they moved into was funded almost entirely by Jane. The rent was paid by Jane. The furniture belonged to Jane. The appliances belonged to Jane. Even the decorations came from Jane's pocket. Her parents regularly sent food supplies that filled the kitchen. Their family driver took both women to work every morning and brought them home every evening. Vivian contributed almost nothing, yet she behaved as though she owned the place. She invited friends over whenever she wanted. Some evenings, Jane returned from work to find strangers sitting comfortably in the living room. Food disappeared from the refrigerator without explanation. Loud gatherings continued late into the night. One evening, Jane finally gathered enough courage to speak. "Vivian, I don't mind your friends visiting, but could you please tell me beforehand?" Vivian rolled her eyes immediately. "Jane, you are overreacting again." "I'm not overreacting. I just wanted a little notice." "Seriously, Must everything be a problem with you? Jane's shoulders dropped. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. Vivian sighed dramatically. You are too sensitive. A few moments later, Jane found herself apologizing. I'm sorry, forget I mentioned it. Vivian smiled, satisfied. That's better. And so the pattern continued. Jane gave, Vivian took. Jane apologized, Vivian demanded more. One called it friendship, the other called it opportunity. And sadly, only one of them truly believed they were friends.
One quiet afternoon, Jane sat outside the house enjoying the cool breeze. A small bowl of snacks rested on her lap as she watched the day pass peacefully. Moments like that had become her escape. Whenever the house felt crowded or her thoughts became too heavy, she would sit outside alone and enjoy the silence. She lifted another snack to her mouth and smiled softly to herself. For once, there was no noise, no judgment, and no uncomfortable conversations. Then, she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw Vivian walking through the gate. Beside her was a handsome young man Jane had never seen before. He was tall, neatly dressed, and carried himself with quiet confidence. Jane immediately stood up, her face brightened with a warm smile. For years, she had listened to Vivian talk about relationships and friendships. She assumed Vivian had finally brought someone special home and wanted to introduce him properly. Vivian, Jane said cheerfully, dusting crumbs from her hands. You didn't tell me you were bringing a guest. For a brief second, Jane expected a smile in return. Instead, Vivian suddenly burst into loud laughter. The sound was so sharp that it immediately made Jane uncomfortable. Vivian laughed harder and turned to the young man. Pointing directly at Jane, she said, Babe, meet my fat friend I've been telling you about. Jane's smile vanished instantly. The words hit her like a slap. For a moment, she thought she had heard wrong. But Vivian wasn't finished. This girl can eat, Vivian continued, laughing. Honestly, I think eating is her full-time job. If food could talk, it would probably beg Jane for mercy. Vivian laughed at her own joke. Jane stood frozen. Her fingers tightened around the bowl she was holding. She could feel her heart sinking deeper with every word. Michael looked uncomfortable, but Vivian continued as if she were performing for an audience. You should see the amount of food she finishes in a day. Sometimes I wonder if she ever gets tired of chewing. The laughter coming from Vivian felt crueler than any insult. Jane felt her throat tighten. Her eyes burned with tears. This was not a stranger humiliating her. This was the person she had called her best friend for years, the person she had trusted, the person she had sacrificed so much for. Slowly, she lowered her head. Her smile was gone. Her dignity felt shattered. Without saying a single word, Jane turned around and rushed into the house. The moment her bedroom door closed behind her, tears streamed down her face. She buried her face in her pillow and cried. Outside, silence fell between Vivian and Michael. Michael stared in the direction Jane had disappeared. His expression had completely changed. What? Asked Vivian with a shrug. Why are you looking at me like that? Michael shook his head slowly. Vivian, what was that? What was what? She replied. The way you just spoke to your friend, Michael said. You embarrassed her for no reason. Vivian rolled her eyes. Oh, please, she's used to it. Michael frowned. Used to it? Come on, Michael, it was just a joke. Michael's voice became firm. No, it wasn't a joke. A joke makes people laugh. That made her cry. Vivian folded her arms. You are taking this too seriously. No, Michael replied. You are not taking it seriously enough. Vivian looked surprised. She's my friend. Exactly, Michael said. She's your friend. If this is how you treat someone you call a friend, I don't want to imagine how you would treat someone you dislike. Vivian's smile disappeared. Are you seriously angry over this? Michael took a deep breath. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. Michael, No, Vivian, listen to yourself. That woman smiled when she saw you. She looked genuinely happy to meet me. And the first thing you did was humiliate her. Vivian tried to laugh it off again. You're overreacting. But Michael was already shaking his head. I don't think this relationship can continue. Vivian's eyes widened. What? I'm serious. You are breaking up with me because of Jane? Michael looked directly at her. No, I'm ending this because of you. Because kindness matters to me. Respect matters to me. And what I just witnessed was neither kind nor respectful. Vivian was speechless. Michael stepped back. If you can treat your closest friend like this, I don't want to imagine how you'll treat me someday. With that, he turned and walked away. Vivian stood there in disbelief. By the time the reality hit her, Michael was already gone. Instead of reflecting on her actions, anger quickly filled her heart. This is all Jane's fault, she muttered. If she hadn't run away crying, none of this would have happened. Months passed. Life slowly moved forward. Although Jane never forgot that painful afternoon, she gradually recovered. She focused on work and spent more time by herself. The wound remained, but the pain no longer felt as sharp as it once had. Then one afternoon, while shopping alone, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Jane? She stopped walking. Slowly, she turned around. A man stood a few feet away, smiling politely. Jane stared at him for a moment. She knew the face, but couldn't immediately place him. I'm sorry, she said softly. Do I know you? The man smiled. Michael. The name instantly brought back memories she wished she could forget. Oh, Jane said awkwardly. It's you. She immediately looked away. Well, it was nice seeing you. She turned to leave, but Michael spoke gently. Please, wait. Jane stopped. I don't want to bother you, he said. I just wanted to say hello. Jane shifted uncomfortably. She was not used to men approaching her, especially men who looked like Michael. I really should go, she replied. Jane, please, Michael said kindly. Just give me 1 minute. Reluctantly, she nodded. Michael looked at her for a moment before speaking. I've wanted to apologize for a long time. Jane looked confused. Apologize for what? For that day, he said. I know I wasn't the one who insulted you, but I still wish I had handled things differently. You didn't deserve what happened. Jane lowered her eyes. Even after months, hearing someone acknowledge her pain made her emotional. Thank you, she whispered. Michael smiled gently. And for what it's worth, I never agreed with anything Vivian said. Jane forced a small smile. That's kind of you. Michael hesitated briefly before continuing. Can I be honest? Jane looked up. You are beautiful, Jane. She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the word sounded so unbelievable. Beautiful. Nobody had ever said that to her with sincerity. People had complimented her kindness, her generosity, her intelligence, but never that. You don't have to say that, she replied quietly. I'm not saying it to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true. Jane stared at him, unsure what to say. For the first time in her life, a man was looking at her with genuine admiration instead of pity. And deep inside, a small part of the heart that had been wounded for so many years began to wonder if perhaps she had been seeing herself through the eyes of her critics for so many years. For several days after meeting Michael at the shopping mall, Jane could not stop thinking about their conversation. It was not because he was handsome. It was not even because he had approached her first. What stayed in her mind was the way he had spoken to her. There had been no pity in his voice, no mockery hidden behind a smile, no cruel joke disguised as concern. He had spoken to her like she mattered, like she was someone worth listening to. A few days later, Michael called her. When she saw his name on her phone, she hesitated before answering. Hello? She said softly. Hi, Jane, Michael replied warmly. I hope I'm not disturbing you. No, you're not. There was a brief silence before Michael spoke again. I was wondering if you would have lunch with me this weekend. Jane immediately shook her head, even though he could not see her. No, Michael, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? He asked gently. Jane sighed. Because you dated Vivian.
Michael almost laughed at the word friend, but he stopped himself. Jane, that relationship ended the moment I saw how she treated you. Jane looked down at the floor. Still, it feels wrong. Does it feel wrong because of Vivian? Michael asked. Or because you are afraid people will judge you? His question caught her off guard. Jane remained silent. Michael continued softly. I'm only asking for lunch. One lunch, nothing more. No pressure, no expectations. Jane hesitated. Just lunch? Just lunch. And after that? After that, you can decide if you ever want to see me again. Jane found herself smiling despite trying not to. You're very persistent. Michael laughed. I've been told that before. After several more minutes of persuasion, Jane finally agreed. Fine, she said. One lunch. One lunch, Michael repeated happily. The day of the lunch arrived, and Jane spent almost an hour deciding what to wear. She could not remember the last time she had been nervous about meeting someone. When she arrived, Michael was already waiting. The moment he saw her, a smile spread across his face. You look lovely, he said. Jane immediately looked away. Compliments always made her uncomfortable. Throughout the lunch, something unexpected happened. Michael listened, truly listened. Whenever Jane spoke, he paid attention to every word. He asked questions. He remembered details. He laughed at her stories. He never interrupted her. He never looked distracted. For the first time in her life, Jane felt like someone genuinely wanted to know her. Not her family, not her money, not her appearance. Her. At one point, Michael asked, What do you enjoy doing when you are alone? Jane blinked in surprise. Nobody has ever asked me that before. Michael smiled. Then I'm glad I did. Jane thought for a moment. I like reading. I like quiet places. Sometimes I sit outside and watch people. Why? Michael asked. Because watching people is easier than talking to them, she admitted with a small laugh. Michael nodded thoughtfully. That sounds lonely. Jane stared at her glass. It is sometimes. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. As the weeks passed, their lunches became regular conversations. Their conversations became friendship. Their friendship slowly became something deeper, though neither of them rushed to name it. Then one afternoon, while they sat talking together, Michael carefully approached a topic he knew was sensitive. Can I ask you something? He said. Jane nodded. Of course. Michael took a deep breath. Have you ever considered losing weight? Jane's smile faded slightly. It was a question she had heard her entire life. Seeing her reaction, Michael quickly continued. Please let me finish. Jane listened quietly. I'm only asking because I think you need to change for anyone, and I'm definitely not saying you're not beautiful. Jane remained silent.
Michael looked directly at her. But I've seen how people's comments affect you. I've seen how much pain you've carried because of how others treat you. Jane slowly lowered her eyes. Sometimes I feel like no matter what I do, people only see my size. Michael nodded. That's exactly why I'm asking. If you ever decide that losing weight would help you feel healthier, stronger, or more confident, I'll support you. And if I don't, she asked, then I'll support you anyway. Jane looked up. Really? Michael smiled. The choice has to be yours, Jane, not mine, not society's. Yours. That conversation stayed with her for days. For the first time, she found herself thinking about weight loss differently. In the past, every attempt had come from pain. She wanted to lose weight because people mocked her, because people rejected her, because people made her feel unworthy. But now, something had changed. This time, she wanted to do it for herself. She wanted to feel stronger, healthier, happier, more confident. Not because she hated her body, because she wanted to take care of it. When she finally told Michael she wanted to begin the journey, his face lit up.
"Then we'll do it together," he said. And they did. Their mornings often began before sunrise. They walked together. Some mornings Jane complained the entire time. "My legs hurt." "Keep walking," Michael would say. "I'm tired." 5 more minutes. "I hate this." Michael would laugh. "No, you don't. You just hate it today." They spent time at the gym. They planned meals together. They celebrated small victories. The journey was far from easy. Some days Jane wanted to quit. Some days she stood in front of the mirror and saw no difference at all. One evening, after a particularly difficult workout, she sat down and shook her head. "I can't do this anymore." Michael sat beside her. "Yes, you can. Nothing is changing." "Everything is changing," he replied. "You just can't see it yet." "What if I fail?" Michael smiled. "Then we'll try again tomorrow." Slowly, week after week, the changes began to appear. Her clothes fit differently. She had more energy. She smiled more often. Then months passed. The transformation became impossible to ignore. But the biggest change wasn't physical, it was emotional. The woman who once avoided mirrors now smiled at her reflection. The woman who once apologized for existing now walked with confidence. The woman who once believed she was unworthy of love was finally beginning to see her own value. Back at home, Vivian noticed everything. Jane seemed happier than she had ever been. She laughed more. She carried herself differently. There was a glow about her that hadn't existed before. It bothered Vivian deeply. One evening, she sat beside Jane and asked casually, "So, who's the guy?" Jane looked up from her book. "What guy?" Vivian rolled her eyes. "The guy making you smile at your phone every 5 minutes." Jane laughed softly. "Nobody." Vivian narrowed her eyes. "Come on, tell me." "There's nothing to tell." But Vivian wasn't convinced. As the weeks passed, she became increasingly obsessed with finding out who Jane was seeing. Every time Jane received a message, Vivian tried to peek at her phone. Every time she went out, Vivian asked questions, but Jane revealed nothing. Michael had asked her to keep their relationship private until the right time, and Jane respected that decision. The more secretive Jane became, the more frustrated Vivian grew. She could see the changes. She could feel that something important was happening. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she could not discover the truth. And deep down, a strange feeling she could not explain had already begun to grow inside her heart. One evening, Jane returned home earlier than usual. She entered quietly and paused when she heard laughter coming from the living room. Vivian was sitting with her friends. They were gossiping, laughing, and making jokes. Jane recognized that kind of laughter. It was the same laughter she had heard many times before whenever she became the topic of discussion. She remained out of sight and listened. "I'm telling you," Vivian said confidently, waving her hand in the air. "Whoever Jane is dating must be fat too. There's no way a normal man would be interested in her." Her friends burst into loud laughter. One of them nearly spilled her drink. "Maybe they met at a buffet," another joked. More laughter followed. Jane closed her eyes briefly. Months ago, those words would have broken her heart, but not anymore. She calmly stepped out of her room wearing her gym clothes. The laughter died instantly. Silence filled the room. Complete silence. Vivian nearly choked when she saw her. Her eyes widened. Jane stood tall and confident. The transformation was impossible to ignore. She looked healthier, stronger, and happier. For the first time, Vivian had no joke to make. Jane simply smiled politely and walked past them toward the kitchen. Nobody said a word. More months passed, and Jane finally reached her goal.
She looked incredible, but what truly amazed people was not her appearance, it was her confidence. She no longer lowered her head when entering a room. She no longer apologized for taking up space. She no longer searched for approval in people's faces. She knew her worth, and that confidence made her shine brighter than anything else ever could. One evening, Vivian walked into the house unusually excited. "Jane," she said, dropping onto the sofa, "I've decided I want to meet this mysterious boyfriend of yours." Jane looked up from her book and smiled. "You do?" "Of course," Vivian replied. "You've been hiding him for too long." Jane nodded calmly and picked up her phone. She made a quick call. After a brief conversation, she ended it and looked at Vivian. "He's on his way." Vivian sat upright immediately. "Really?" Jane simply smiled. A few minutes later, the door opened. Footsteps echoed through the room. Then, Michael walked inside. Vivian's face lost all color. Her entire body froze. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. "Michael," she whispered. Before she could say another word, Jane stood up, walked across the room, and wrapped her arms around him. Michael smiled and held her close. The room became silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Vivian stared in disbelief. Jane slowly turned toward her. Years of memories flashed through her mind. Every insult, every cruel joke, every time she had heard laughter behind her back, every moment she had been used, mocked, and humiliated by the person she called her best friend. Yet when she spoke, her voice was calm. "Vivian, I've known for a long time." Vivian blinked. "Known what?" Jane looked directly into her eyes. "I've known about the gossip. I've known about the insults. I've known about the jokes you and your friends made about me." Vivian's mouth fell open. Jane continued. "I knew you stayed in my life because of what you could gain from me. I knew much more than you ever imagined." Tears began forming in Vivian's eyes. "Jane, that's not true." Jane shook her head gently. "Please don't insult my intelligence. I heard things. I saw things. I just chose to ignore them." "Why?" Vivian asked weakly. Jane smiled sadly. "Because I was afraid of being alone. I thought having a fake friend was better than having no friend at all." Tears rolled down Vivian's cheeks. Jane took a deep breath, but not anymore. "I finally understand that my value doesn't depend on what other people think of me." Vivian suddenly broke down crying. "Jane, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I made mistakes. I was stupid. Please don't do this." She moved closer desperately. "You're my friend." Jane listened quietly. When Vivian finished speaking, she calmly replied, "Keep your apology." Vivian froze. "What?" "I forgive you," Jane said softly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean giving you access to my life again." The words hit harder than a slap. Jane continued, "You have 1 hour to pack your belongings and leave this house." Vivian stared at her in shock. "Jane, please." Jane shook her head. "My decision is final." Then she added something Vivian never expected. "And don't worry, I won't ask my parents to take away your job." Vivian looked up in surprise. "You won't?" "No," Jane replied, "even though I could." Tears streamed down Vivian's face. Jane's voice remained steady. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to become the kind of person you were to me." The room fell silent once more. And for the first time, Vivian truly understood what she had lost. Vivian walked slowly into her room and closed the door behind her. For several minutes, she simply stood there, staring at the walls. The reality of what had happened was finally sinking in. With trembling hands, she began packing her belongings. Every dress she folded reminded her of Jane. Every pair of shoes reminded her of Jane. Every comfort she had enjoyed over the years had somehow come from Jane's kindness. As she zipped her first suitcase,
tears rolled down her cheeks. By the time she packed the last one, she could barely see through her tears. The suitcases felt heavier than they really were, not because of what was inside them, but because of what she was leaving behind. She wasn't losing a house. She wasn't losing comfort. She was losing the one person who had genuinely cared for her when she had nothing. When she finally dragged her luggage to the living room, Jane and Michael were standing quietly together. Vivian looked at Jane with red eyes. "I wish I could change everything," she whispered. Jane looked at her calmly but said nothing. Some wounds were simply too deep for words. Vivian nodded sadly. She picked up her bags and walked toward the door. Just before stepping outside, she turned one last time. For a brief moment, she saw the friendship she had thrown away with her own hands. Then she left. As the door closed behind her, she realized she had destroyed the best friendship she would ever have. Life continued. As the months passed, Michael and Jane grew even closer. Their relationship was built on honesty, respect, and genuine affection. Michael never made Jane feel like she needed to become someone else to be loved. One evening, under a beautiful sky, he took her hand and smiled. "Jane, you changed my life the day I met you." Jane smiled softly. "You changed mine, too." Michael got down on one knee. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Jane's eyes, not tears of pain this time, but tears of happiness. "Yes," she replied, 1,000 times yes. Their wedding was filled with laughter, joy, and love, not because Jane had become slimmer, not because she looked different, but because she had finally found someone who loved her exactly as she was. Michael respected her, protected her, encouraged her, celebrated every victory she achieved, no matter how small. Together, they built the life Jane had once only dreamed about. They traveled together, shared beautiful experiences, and created countless memories. Their home became a place filled with peace, laughter, and genuine love. Jane continued maintaining her healthy lifestyle, but not because she was afraid of gaining weight again, not because Michael expected it. She did it because she genuinely loved how healthy, strong, and confident she felt. Years later, Vivian eventually got married too. Life moved forward for everyone, but there was one regret that never left her heart. Sometimes she would sit quietly and remember Jane. She would remember the friend who had stood by her during her hardest days, the friend who had paid her fees, shared her blessings, opened her home, and treated her like family. Then she would remember how she repaid that kindness with mockery, selfishness, and betrayal, and each memory hurt more than the last. The greatest loss in Vivian's life was not money, nor opportunities, nor relationships. It was losing the one true friend who had loved her sincerely. As the years passed, Jane's story became a reminder of an important truth. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Some people abuse loyalty because they believe it will last forever. But every heart has a limit. Jane's greatest transformation was never the weight she lost. It was discovering her worth. The day she realized her value did not depend on other people's opinions was the day her life truly changed. And once she understood that, she never again allowed anyone to treat her less than she deserved. Because the people who truly love you will never make you feel small.